Right now, he is running for the U.S. Senate on the Republican ticket. He hopes to be your next senator from the great state of Kentucky, Commonwealth of Kentucky. His name is Dr. Rand Paul. Please give him a big round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out. I'm proud to be an American. I will not apologize for being an American. I will not apologize for the American way of life, for capitalism, for private property, for the things that create the jobs and the prosperity that has made us the greatest nation in the history of mankind. In the winter of 1776, Washington was retreating, defeat after defeat. They get into New Jersey. It's December 23rd. Thomas Paine is retreating with him, and he said to Thomas Paine, "Go back to Philadelphia, write us something to inspire the troops." And Thomas Paine wrote those immortal words, "These are the times that try men's souls." I believe we live in those times again.
Yeah.
I believe we face a day of reckoning.
Amen.
I believe that a $2 trillion annual deficit is consuming our economy and threatens the foundation of this country.
Yeah.
Interest alone on the debt is $400 billion. If interest rates begin to rise like they did in the 1970s, interest alone will consume the entire budget. It's not about what you want to spend the money on, it's about where is the money going to come from and what will it do to our livelihoods, what will it do to the job market, what will it do to our economy if we keep borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. You cannot borrow your way into prosperity. In the latter days of Rome, as the economy was crumbling, the emperors would give the mob, they would placate the mob with bread and circus, food and entertainment to distract them as the economy was in shambles and dwindling around them. Now in our country, as our economy is in shambles, they give us cash for clunkers and a stimulus check. And they tell us, go to the mall and spend your money and everything will be okay. They want you to put your head in the sand and go to the mall and everything will be okay. That's not how you become prosperous as an individual or as a country. In 1995, we had 1,000 earmarks. In 2005, there were 14,000 earmarks. What are these earmarks going to? Well, there was a $2 million earmark to study why pigs stink. Okay? It would be funny if it weren't so tragic. There was earmarks in there, even on the national security budget. Earmarks from Indiana saying that, well, we need to protect certain things in Indiana. Well, what were the things they were going to protect from the terrorists? The popcorn factory, the Mule Day parade, the Amish popcorn factory. The list went on and on, 9,000 earmarks, but they didn't have anything to do with national security. We do have to have national security, but if you're doing all these wasteful and wanton projects, you can't do what the federal government's supposed to do, and that's provide for the national defense.
Amen.
The waste goes on and on and on. You look at the budget, $72 billion in 2008, unaccounted for. Nobody knows where it went. $72 billion. The Congressional Budget Office has said there's at least $100 billion in waste that could be culled. We have bills that no one reads the bills. The bank bailout bill was 1,000 pages, printed at midnight, and passed by noon the next day. No one read the bill. The health care bill, 2,500 pages. And when we ask questions about it, what do they say? They say, well, you'll learn about it in the next 6 months as we all learn what's in the bill. I propose they have a waiting period. They want me to wait to purchase a gun. I want them to wait to pass legislation.
Yeah!
I propose they wait 1 day for every 20 pages. That'd keep them busy for a while. It's a craziness that goes on and on and on. Washington is horribly broken. And I will be criticized. The media will say, how are you going to cut this program that's supposed to help people? And I will say, explain to me why we should mortgage our children and our grandchildren's future for this program. It's a balancing act. We have to say we will spend money, but we bring in about $2.4 trillion. Is that not enough? We're spending nearly $4 trillion and only bringing in 2.4. Is it an extreme idea to simply ask them to only spend what they bring in? They will attempt to characterize me, and you by extension, as being out of the mainstream. But what I say is extreme is a $2 trillion debt. What I say is extreme is a $400 billion interest payment. Those are the extremes that we need to fear, and we need to present and articulate our message, continue to gather, and we will be a presence, and we will be heard. I think Washington was one of our greatest leaders, not for what he did necessarily, and he did many great things, but for what he didn't do. I don't think we can even imagine how famous George Washington was in his own lifetime, the national acclaim. We have a great crowd here that is just, to me, amazing. But when George Washington came after the victories of the Revolutionary War, the entire town of Shepherdsville would show up. Every town throughout the U.S., everybody poured out. He was amazingly famous. And when he became president, he could have had anything he wanted. He could have been king. He is the one man in our history who could have, through democratic action, been voted to be a king. But he had the presence of mind, the presence of history to say no. And he served only 8 years, thereby setting a precedent that went on for 150 years of limiting the terms in office. We must once again do that. People say to me, well, we have elections, you might even get elected. Look, people can get elected in this country. The problem is I'm the exception to the rule if I get elected. The normal incumbent, and I'm not running against an incumbent also, the average incumbent senator has $8 million in the bank when they start the election. The average congressman has $1 million in the bank. How is any ordinary citizen going to come up against that and win? We need to limit their terms. They aren't listening to us anyway. Let's bring them on home. Amen. Washington warned in his farewell address about factions, partisan politics. Now, he was blessed to be in a time when there really was near complete unity. But very quickly after that, we really evolved quickly or devolved quickly into partisan politics. But there is one thing. People complain and they say, oh, the Tea Party's so divisive. But there are things that we can say that I think can bring people together. For example, during George Bush's administration, he was largely blamed and vilified by many in the media for Katrina. He had no control over Katrina, but he was blamed and vilified for it. 3 days into Katrina, do you know what he did? He waived the Jones Act and accepted help from foreign countries. Yes, sir. Likewise, I think it has been a little unfair to blame President Obama for the BP oil disaster. There are questions he will have to answer. For example, there were shown to be cracks in the mining equipment days and weeks and months before the accident happened. Why did President Obama and his regulators not step in and do anything? Those questions will have to be asked, but ultimately, it's not his fault for the oil spill. And what we need to do as a country is pull together. Is there anybody here who doesn't want the beach to be cleaned up? We want it to be cleaned up. We want BP to pay for it. We don't want to pay for it. But we want everybody to work together. We don't want empty partisanship. Republican or Democrat, where we simply blame the oil spill on one person or another. The federal government, the state governments, and primarily BP needs to be involved in this. But the thing is we aren't working together. We have, on occasion, had people from the administration saying they want to put the boot heel on the throat of a company. I don't think that type of rhetoric serves any useful purpose to getting it cleaned up. Amen. BP needs to be responsible. We all agree with that. But you know what? Bobby Jindal down there is one of the heroes in Louisiana.
Yeah.
Bobby Jindal immediately called for action. Do something to prevent the oil washing up on our beaches. Put up the berms. But just like everything else with the federal government, there was some kind of permit he had to get, and no one would give him the permit. It took 3 or 4 weeks to get the permit. Likewise, we've had 17 countries offer us help in cleaning up the oil spill. Big, huge ships, the Whale, the Swan, all these ships that can skim up the oil. And President Obama did not waive the Jones Act for 71 days and only under duress because he was beholden to certain people who want to protect their ports from any foreign ships. But this is an emergency. He should have waived the Jones Act immediately. He should have accepted the help, and it would have made the beaches a lot cleaner, a lot faster. Now, I'd like to think I was the first person ever mistreated by the press, but you know what? I think I'm not. You go back to Adams and Jefferson and you see the vitriol. People think it was a kindler, gentler time. It wasn't. The newspapers were as lopsided and partisan in Adams and Jefferson time as they are today. Oh, sorry, we don't have any in Kentucky that are, but in Adams and Jefferson times, it was so mean-spirited that they quit talking to each other. They had gone to France together as ambassadors. They'd been in Washington's administration, but then they ran against each other twice for president. They didn't talk for over a decade, but they were fortunate to live long lives. And in 1812, they started corresponding again. And as they corresponded for 14 years, and they became friends again. And I think one of the things we should think about as July 4th comes together is how these two great Americans came together and how we aren't a divisive spirit. We are a spirit that wants government to come back to the people. We're not against other people. We are an inclusive body, and we are a big body, but we are inclusive, and we want to take our government back. Yeah. Plain and simple. In one of the uniquely American historical things, on July 4th in 1826, both Thomas Jefferson and John Adams died at the same time, same day virtually. And as John Adams died, his last words were, "Thomas Jefferson yet lives." I think we should think of our founding fathers as still living on. The ideas were great. The experiment was a unique experiment of individual liberty and freedom. We do not want to lose that. We have sincere beliefs, and let's don't let them vilify us in the media and make us out to be something we are not. Stick together, stay strong, and we can win. Thank you very much for having me.